Hello and welcome to Realtors on the Road. We have a special edition today, and we have a very special guest and this other guy as well. I'm just kidding.
I'm not the special guest.
I'm just kidding. We have Renee Acho and David Hall with us today, and we're talking business. We're talking about 2023, and we're talking about how Renee got in the business as well. So first question I need to hear from you, Renee, is how did you get into real estate? Let's hear the story.
It's a very accidental, crazy little story that leads all roads back to this gentleman to my right over here. And I will give him credit for it. So I was a high school teacher.
After 20-some years, I'm finally getting my credit.
Stop crying. You know I give you credit.
Nobody's been talking about this story.
So we're gonna reveal all today, everybody.
I feel like
so
it's kind of nice. It's like
anymore.
the big reveal.
2 decades later.
Yes.
He was waiting to make sure I was successful before he claimed me. That's really what it was.
That's true. He did say something about that.
You did your 10 billionth house, so now you're
we're ready.
successful. Yes.
Now we're ready. So I was a high school teacher, and David and I shared a friend in common while I was teaching who introduced me to David very early on, 23 years ago to be exact. He was building a house and doing some renovation, and she introduced me to him because I have a background in design and architecture, and said, hey, a friend of my husband's is looking to do this. Any chance you want to help him?
He needs some help.
He needs help, and he doesn't know where to go and doesn't want to hire a real decorator. So how would you like to take this? I said, well, sounds like a great match.
He was waiting to be successful, too.
Yeah.
He was on his way up, too.
He was on his way up in a whole different field. So that was the introduction, helped him with that house, which then parlayed into, hey, let's, I'm thinking about doing some of these fix and flips and renovations on the side. You want to help me? I said, sure. I was, at that time, 8 months pregnant with my first baby, taking some time out of teaching, and thought this was some good way to earn some extra cash.
Alex,
my oldest. And so as that sort of progressed, and we did a few more of these houses, he then said, you've got a talent in this business, and would you should think about real estate. Introduced me there to one of his very good colleagues who ended up being a mentor and started me in real estate as a buyer's agent. Wonderful, wonderful place to start. I still look to all of the wonderful education he gave me. And then he ended up going and moving from the area that I was used to in Birmingham, Bloomfield, to Grosse Pointe. And I said, you know what, that's more than I bargained for. It's outside my comfort zone of knowledge. So I'm going to go back to teaching. And left the business. Went back to teaching. At that time, David took off running in his career. And then a couple years later, had my second child. And unfortunately, there was a health issue, a very serious health crisis with my second daughter, which put us into some financial point that was less than comfortable. And as a teacher's salary part-time, it just wasn't making ends meet. So ironically, I started getting calls from people who I had worked with a little bit in real estate and said, hey, I'm going to sell my house. Would you like to do this? And I thought, well, let me do the math on that. Certainly the teacher's salary is not what, especially part-time, is not what it could be for in real estate. And with the financial pressure that we had, it made sense to go into it. So I ended up going back into real estate years later and got in 2006 and 2007, which was a really exciting time to get in the real estate industry. But it launched a very interesting profession, and with my background that I had from my family growing up in the architecture design field, it was a natural fit for helping builders, and that was really a niche part of my market and still is. The builders who would build these properties but really didn't get an earful until it was over about what people were looking for, what colors, what styles, what are the pain points that people are looking for in homes. They wouldn't do that into the design. They'd hear about it after, and I presented them with the unique option to, hey, let me get in the beginning. Let me help you in the design stage so that I can bring to the table the selections and a lot what I had done with David, what I learned from working with David and bringing that asset to the front end of the builders and being a consultant for them was then advantageous, and it helped build my business very quickly because I now had 2 or 3 builders who had multiple properties, and I made my mark very quickly with that being the background. And since then, that consultative approach of for helping people see past what they can't see. Sometimes it's just a paint color.
Yeah.
Let alone moving walls or doing buildings. So it's really been a huge advantage that I didn't recognize until I started really growing in the business. And there's no question, David not only got me, he found talent, which we all know is David's one of David's.
He said, "You're going places."
He did. He told me
This
before
girl's
I
going
knew.
places.
Yeah.
Like, shut up. I just want to go home and make dinner.
Well, that kind of brings me to my point. So
Well, she had, but I just want to say that Renee had, 3 or 4 just very strong qualities that I knew would do well in real estate. The first is she had an eye for things, for space. Like, I like to think that I do too to some degree, but she could see things that I think others couldn't see with how to design spaces and things like that. So that was like a big check mark. And then she had a lot of confidence in the way that she spoke about the things that she was passionate about. And then Renee's very likable. So I knew that in the real estate game, if you're likable and you're confident and you kind of understand space, and then I think the other part was like, I don't think Renee's like afraid to take chances, not in a good way, meaning like, let's do this paint color. And I'm like, I don't know, really? And then it turns out pretty good. And it's like, I guess she knows what she's talking about, So there's like she's not safe, she's not risky, but she's just not safe. I think all that lent itself to her potentially going to become a really good person in that business.
yeah. I was going to say, I think David had a little bit of a different perspective of you joining the real estate market as well. So you kind of explained it there, but he did use the term waddled into, you waddled into his life.
Well, notice she was 8 months pregnant when I first met her, and I didn't know she was coming over, about to have a child. So, who I was with he turned to me and he goes, "Is this the designer?" I said, "I think so." Not sure.
And
she said, "Hey, I'm Renee. I'm here."
Yeah.
We're like, okay. So it's just, it was good.
Well, I love it. And so I know that you talked about the education piece being so important of your life, whether that's, education as the school system or education as educating clients and realtors as well. So something that you're super passionate about still, even when you're in the real estate industry, is education. So what is the one piece of advice that you would give realtors right now? If you could tell
Just one. Wow, it's
if
tough.
you could tell one or every realtor one piece of advice, what would it be?
It would be to never stop trying to learn and learn all facets. Learning is the key fundamental, and this goes back to my teaching, and it's certainly I say all the time that real estate's my profession and teaching's my passion. And when you have a mind of, complacency is the death of all growth. People get into something, they often will try to follow other people's lead. How do you do a listing? How do you do a buyer's presentation? And, being authentic to who you are and growing that component of it instead of trying to reproduce somebody else's material is really a failure that I think a lot of people take. And all joking aside, David saw something that I didn't recognize in myself. And there's no question, my path in life was completely changed because I saw that I have no training and background in sales. I taught history, for God's sake. Like, I have no sales, no marketing, none of that. But he saw something and helped me to achieve that and then say, all right, go ahead, keep doing this. And that was it's been a game changer in my life. But I think oftentimes people come into a sales position or into this as copying what other people have done. And I think that it's being authentic on who you are. What is your value proposition? And really growing that value proposition as a resource to your clients. And I think that people sometimes will just grab other people's material and not understand that becomes inauthentic. And that isn't going to grow with you the way that it needs to. So
Right. Well, I think that's something similar to what David often preaches is actually to still stay authentic to yourself, like you're saying, but to grab, and like you said, grab little nuggets from people. I think that's something that you've always said is that the reason why you've gotten to where you're at is to be able to learn from others, just like you're saying as well, and grabbing, and whether that's like learning the opposite of what they're doing and like, I'm never going to do that, or taking like that, this guy or girl is doing this amazing and I want to be like them, so I'm going to grab a little bit from that too. But I think that you're right that the curiosity piece of life and in real estate, anything is huge and developing.
Yeah.
Do you have any words to
Well,
that?
I would just say that to sort of compound Renee's point is that I think that when you are constantly observing what other people are doing, so you're learning and you're taking things in, and maybe you're going to incorporate this one little piece into your game. I feel like that a lot of my career has been an accumulation of best practices from other people where I'm like, oh, that guy sends an email right after he talks to somebody thanking them for their time. I'm going to start doing that. And then it just becomes part of your game. But, to Renee's point, you got to be you, but then you want to always add things in, and that's part of the learning,
That's crucial. And I think that people don't understand. Oftentimes people think, oh, I already know that. I'm not going to go to that class.
Yeah.
Or I'm past that. That's below my pay grade. Constant learning and re-educating yourself at every level is absolutely essential to not becoming stale in any industry. And, again, thinking that you know everything in our kind of industry, especially where things change minute by minute, is really a failure of growth. And people often will look at something and say, I want all the answers. I want the full playbook. I want, hand me the playbook. And what they don't understand is, Tom Brady can hand somebody his playbook. They're not going to execute it the way Tom Brady would. But if you take 10 or 15 of the best quarterbacks and a little from Stafford, a little from Brady, and a little from, whoever else it is, and you take those core components and you make your own playbook out of, like what David's saying, the best practices, it's all about taking certain nuggets and creating your own. And as soon as you then put that playbook down and say, I've learned everything, it's time to retire. Because that is never going, those plays are going to become old to somebody else. So it's constant learning. If you ever think you've got all of the answers, please retire.
The other thing about that, too, when you hear it a second time, if you go to something that you've already seen and you do it, you're thinking about it in a different way because you're in a different place than you were the first time. So I could go to the same course, educational course 5 years later from before, but I'm in a different place mentally. So I'm picking up something different from it. And I think that's where people really miss out when they're like, well, I already did that. Well, you're going to view all the information differently at this point. So it's really important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So
Are we dropping the hint on the big thing Renee's doing in 2023, or are we not?
I
Are we
don't
not
know if
talking?
we're gonna do. I think we
You're
just
welcome.
do a little teaser.
You're welcome to it.
I think we
problem.
Or should we
do a little
tease it?
teaser?
We could tease it, and then we make her come back to talk about it. That's the way to do it.
Okay.
Something big.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody.
I got like a big Ben. We need a big graphic. June 2023,
Coming
confidential.
soon. Yes.
Can you do that? Okay.
I'll
Ben's
give.
got
How about we give hints? It has to do with education
Ooh.
in real estate.
in real
Ooh.
estate in June 2023. That's
Calling
the
all
teaser.
agents.
Ah.
Calling all
Yes.
agents. Something is rolling out that brings the
We will
package
bring it
out.
to you, and we'll have Renee back on the show in June. But speaking of 2023, we have to know, Renee, what do you think is going to happen in the market in 2023? What trends do you think we're going to be seeing? I don't know. I think you have a crystal ball. I feel like you might, but let's see. We're like, bring it out.
So, we all wish we had the crystal ball. We like to think we all have one. And the crystal ball is pretty simple. Markets change, and markets are always going to change. And anybody who thinks that, oh no, we're in a shifting market, anytime you think you're not in a shifting market, you're not paying attention. 2020 was a shift. 2021 was a shift. 2022 is a shift. 2023 is going to be a shift. The only thing that changes is the math and the messaging. That's it. How you're doing loans now, you might be reintroducing things like an ARM or a 2-to-1 buy down, or things that, David, you and I were talked about 20 years ago that are now just reintroducing themselves because they're relevant. It's just like fashion trends, right? The 80s look is going to come back whether we like it or not, ladies. It might have a little bit of a spin on the neon, but it will be here. So it's all about shifting in the messaging to helping people. What is the concern? What is the pain point? How do we shift to make it palatable to the people who are in the market? Sales are never going to stop. Real estate's never going to stop. Mortgages are never going to prevent people from getting into homes. It is the foundation and fundamental part of the American dream and really our financial systems. So it's not going to go anywhere. What people are hearing, and I think this is the big takeaway that I keep trying to get out, is that when you're looking at a national or federal level, of course things are looking, if you look at the big picture, you've got inflation, you have interest rate increases, you have depleted inventory, you have a lot of different things that are moving parts that are creating concern, which they will. What we know is that if you look at trends 20 years ago, 30, 40, 50, you know that just like the stock market, there are blue chip things, blue chip stocks that are going to continue to have investors behind them. So there are industry proof recession-proof industries, and then there are recession-protected areas, just like there are relatively recession-protected, stock purchases, right? So instead of looking, yes, as a whole, are we going to be in a bit of a hiccup? We have to be. We should be. Anybody who goes up 25% in one quarter, that needs to have a correction because that's unhealthy in a lot of ways. So all we're doing is pulling things back to a healthy point in which people can now navigate the system. There should never be 15 offers on a $2 million house. It's ridiculous. But the one caveat to all of this is going to continue to be inventory. So I tell people, don't prevent yourself from buying a home. Date the rate, marry the house, just like all things will change. This too is going to go up and down and fluctuate. But the most important thing is that if you're buying in an area that is relatively recession protected, which we all have, you look for three things that are the trifecta of making something stable. It's location, location, location. What does that mean? Great school system, centrally located for people getting to any artery where they want to work, and a really solid municipality. That means that your police, your fire, your safety of your community is stable. Your school system, both public and private, are stable. And then it gives people a larger audience of marketability. If you're working uptown, downtown, east, west, you have arteries to get there, which then draws in a bigger crowd of people. Those things will stabilize in any market. They'll fluctuate like everything does. But if you're looking to get in the game, which you all should be, those are the things to be looking at. And this is not a federal issue across the board. Florida continues to have 2,000 people a day going to Florida to buy. Right? New York,
yeah,
same thing. There are always areas that if you're looking to buy, you just have to be smart about it, but don't take yourself out of the game because as soon as the curtain pulls and these things stabilize, you're going to have the flood of people coming back in and you're going to have a condition that has not been erased, and that's going to be inventory. Mm-hmm. The supply chains are still going to be a problem, and you're still going to have low inventory, which means what? The prices aren't going anywhere in those areas. So if you're waiting for things to take a crash like 2008 and 9, my prediction, don't hold your breath.
You think that low inventory continues in 2023? Because that has been the story.
It has to. There's three things that have been happening. Number one, and this is something that I think people aren't understanding, we still have border issues. We still have inventory issues, right? Those supplies are not changing. The other issue is it's not just supply, it's labor shortages. So now that we've had, unfortunately, these huge hurricanes that have really impacted Florida and part of, our coast and these states, whereas now where are the people going to go and where is the most supplies going to go? They're going to go to the places that are most devastated. So our already interrupted supply chain and our already, lower labor, issues are going to now also be a further depleted consideration, which means these other places like the Birminghams, the Bloomfields, the Oakland counties, the bigger areas are going to be further in the hole for that. And I still work with primarily builders, and they're still building, but those costs aren't coming down. Yeah. They are still high, which means that's the baseline of pricing that sets for everybody else. So if they're not bringing their prices down, that's still the set point. Yeah. And that inventory isn't going to go real far because you can't put a lot more onto the market. So, inventory, if you talk to any economist, and I talk to them all the time, they continue to tell us that that's the outlier that we can't really grasp to say whether or not things are going to be different.
Absolutely. David, to end it, what would you tell anyone looking to buy a home in 2023? So given what Renee was just chatting about with the trends that we anticipate to see, what would you tell anyone that's interested in buying a home?
Well, I think,
or selling?
Yeah, I think it depends on, if they're a move-up buyer, first-time home buyer, so I might give a little different advice. But in general terms, it's great from the standpoint that you can actually get a house. You couldn't find a house in 2021 and early 2022. And I think that the other thing that's key is that you can negotiate the price a little bit. You definitely can get your inspection and your appraisal where you had to waive all that stuff. So a more normalized market, I think, makes for a better market for buyers. And we had so many people leave the market because they got frustrated. They didn't want to pay over asking. They didn't want to be in a bid with 20 other people. They didn't want to waive the appraisal and the inspection, and rightfully so. So now that the market's quote-unquote normalized, and to Renee's point, which I say all the time, is we needed to have a pullback. We need a pullback for the health of the market. I think it's a good time to potentially buy, and I think that these buy-down programs, our Easy Start program, is really great because folks can lock in the fours And a lot of them don't know that. And so we've been educating them about that as well. And there's probably going to be an opportunity in the next 24 months for them to refinance from those programs that are fixed rates, which is cool. Like the ARM that's a fixed is a really nice program that we haven't had before. And
Right.
I think it's a great option for consumers.
Yeah. So anyone out there, there's still hope, there's still products, and there's still experts like Renee that are here to help you, and like Hall Financial. I think that if you are using your resources like a good realtor and a good lender, then you're gonna have no problem. And like you guys said, it's a good market still, and it's all relative. So it's still a good time to buy or sell, and just got to use your resources.
Yep.
But thank you so much. I'm so happy that we finally uncovered the secret of how you got into the market, even though the not so secret. But thank you, David and Renee, for joining us today. And have an amazing day.
Thanks.
Thank you.